Did you have any close calls? I mean,
Well, you know what? I've had some close calls. I was loading a D6 cat over near Weaverville. It was raining, and I was coming down a hill, and the big old trailer, high trailer we was putting it on, wasn't within an inch of being out of level. It was raining, and I walked that cat up on there, and you walk right down into what we call the well in front. I had to drop down, and just as I did, that cat snapped over sideways and tipped over and was sitting straight up and down right alongside that trailer. And I'm in there, and I just reach over and shut the throttle off so it didn't ruin the motor. And so I got out of there, and we pulled the truck down another place down there. And so in order to, as a D6, a 10K D6C cat, I hooked the chain up on top of that cat. And the truck driver was trying to tell me where to pull it back over with a pickup. Now, this sounds unreal, but it happened. And I did it the way I wanted to, and that thing came back over, and we put a block in front of it to where it would stop when it come over. And by golly, it stopped, and it just flopped back over, and I pulled it over with a 3/4 ton pickup. And it was just sitting on a perfect balance, and over it came, and it went down there and bounced and stopped. It cost me $1,000 because it broke a swing frame underneath, but I didn't realize that for 6 months. But anyway, then we went on down to where it was level, and right straight off was a creek 100 feet right down below. And you know, I fixed the seat belt because I had a man killed on that cat the first day he went to work that same year. He got killed, a 60-year-old man. He was going around a kind of a turn with that bulldozer on the Skid Row trail, and he evidently passed out, and he just went off the bank, and he rolled over right down there, and he ended up underneath it with his head cut off. And I was working up this other place where I was bringing the cat out of, and I got there, and I'm telling you, that was a sad thing. I went down and crawled up on it with cables. My wife had been to town that day. My present wife, Mary Kay, had been there. And I got a choker, went down there and put it on that frame of that cat. I never went down underneath there where that man was. I could see him there, but he was dead, and I knew it. And then a guy came up there to pull this cat over so that we could get it off of him. And it was out of Weaverville, and somebody had messed with his cat. He got within 15 or 20 feet from where he had to be to make the pull, and the cat quit. It absolutely wouldn't run at all. You couldn't crank it, you couldn't move it. Somebody tampered with it and destroyed it. And so there comes another guy with a smaller cat, and he gets in there, and I hooked him up, and we pulled that cat back up over, and it popped over, and we held it there on that hillside. And pretty quick, this guy, there were some people from the morgue came. There's 3 people came out there, and they got the body and drug it right down into a kind of a skid road there. And this guy all of a sudden says, which I've never realized why he said it. He says, you know, I never know when this brake would slip. And
never know what?
When the brake would slip and that cat would roll again. So I hollered down there, and I said, you people down there with that body, I says, get it out of there because this thing might roll over and kill all of you. So by God, it wasn't 2 seconds until they picked him up, and out of there they did go. And then another cat came in there, a bigger cat, and he was going to hook onto the back end. I wanted him to use the line that I used. He had a friend of yours in Weaverville, Orrin, and I can't think of his name. But anyway, Jim Pruitt, he didn't want to use my rigging, he wanted to use his own rigging. So he hooked onto the winch of that cat, and he was starting to winch it up there, and it was getting dark, and you could see fire flying. And pretty quick, that spun it around and started winching it back up that hill, and that damn thing started down the mountain. It broke, just blew apart. The cable just blew apart, and that cat went down that mountain and went right past where that old boy was dead and hit a digger pine tree that big around and stopped it. And So we went down there and we hooked onto it. He backed right up to the winch with the other one and he jerked it around and got it without tipping it over and got it turned around, and they pulled it backwards clear out to where we could get at it the next day. And when it was upside down, that cat, the boy that was helping this cat skinner, found out later that he'd been having seizures. And that's why he wrote it. His wife said, well, he'd been passing out. We didn't know this or we would never hired him. My brother James hired him, I didn't. But anyway, and I never knew the man. He was 60 years of age. But anyway, by golly, we got the cat. When that cat rolled over, White just kept on running. Well, all the oil things are on the bottom, and when they go onto the top that pump the oil, why, it just absolutely burned up everything in there. And so we took it back out, and I told Jim, I says, you know, I'll bet that motor's ruined. And they went out there. I called Peterson Tractor in Eureka the next morning as soon as they opened, and they said, don't let anybody crank it because it says it's probably already ruined because all the oil pump can't pump upside down. The oil's below it. So anyway, by golly, we ended up going out there and they had it cranked, and I had them to shut it off. It still cost 10 grand to fix it after that, but the man died, and that was a terrible thing. And you know, he got very little out of that because in those days they didn't pay as much for things like that. But he couldn't sue us, and he didn't. His wife she said that she told us the whole story. If he'd only told us that, why, we wouldn't have ever hired him. But as it was, why, life goes on, and it didn't go on. That was the end of that story.